everyone, and a warm welcome to you all. I'm Marina Safe. I'm one of the clinical supervisors here at Express Medicals and a registered public health nutritionist. Welcome back to our webinar series on gut health. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce you today to a very interesting webinar, all about the fascinating connection between your brain and your gut, known as the psychobiome. If you missed part one, which was a solid knowledge based on the gut microbiome, that is available on our website. However, I'm sure that this session will be as informative and enjoyable, even if you haven't seen that yet. Please allow me to reintroduce you to our expert speaker leading the webinar today, Francesca Nicholas. She's a registered nutritionist and has extensive qualifications and experience in public health, well-being, physiology, and naturopathy. We also have Kirsty Thompson, who will be in the chat moderating your questions. Kirsty is a registered nutritional therapist specializing in biomedicine, practice-orientated nutrition, and clinical training. So please do put all your questions in the question box below. It will appear as a speech bubble with a question mark on the right-hand side of your screen. Thank you both for joining us today. It's such a pleasure to have you back for another fantastic webinar. And just to let you all know, the webinar will be recorded and it will be made available on our website. A link will be sent to all the attendees. Now, without further ado, allow me to hand you over to Francesca.
Thank you, Marina. Hello to everyone again, and welcome to our Gut Psychobiome webinar. As Marina kindly already said, if you have any questions, and that will be even live questions throughout the webinar, please put them in the chat function box, and Kirsty will be manning that throughout, and she can answer any questions that you have. And then at the end, we'll also have time for a Q&A, and I'll read through any of the questions that anyone's put in the chat so we can talk through them. And thank you for joining us today. So the objectives that we are going to go through today is we are going to recap on the human gut microbiome. So just in case you missed the last one, we'll go through a little bit on that. We're now going to go through a new and exciting part of new research, which is the psychobiome. And what does that science actually tell us? And then what can we actually do to improve this all the way through? So in our last webinar, we learned that the human body is home to trillions of microorganisms, and bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microbes, and we call that the gut microbiome. And if we have a recap of some of the functions of gut bacteria quickly, it will just lead us nicely into the follow-up topic of the psychobiome itself. And the first thing, if you remember from the last webinar, is digestion and nutrient absorption. So it aids in the breakdown or the digestion of complex carbohydrates or fibers that are resistant to us as humans to try and digest. So by breaking these down into a simpler version, we can absorb them and then utilize them as an energy source for us. The microbiome is also extremely important in your immune function. And science tells us that it's a really pivotal role in trying to train and modulate your immune system. So it's helping the body identify what's harmless and what's harmful. And if we're keeping the immune system from overreacting, we can do that knowing that if we have a more diverse gut profile, the better our immune system can actually be. And we like to use easy to follow analogies in our webinars. And again, if you remember from the last one, or for those that couldn't attend that one, it's like a small factory inside. And your gut bugs are factories which are producing these chemicals and then munching on fiber that comes into our bodies. And then they help to synthesize vitamins like vitamin B, vitamin K, and something called short chain fatty acids, which have an anti-inflammatory effect on our bodies. We also have the protection from invaders. So our gut microbiome helps us to protect from pathogens, and the friendly beneficial varieties help keep that balance between the two. So it's starting to almost prevent the colonization of less friendly kinds. And we've got that barrier protection, which is something, again, we're going to speak about today. And it helps to protect your barrier function, which is crucial to preventing harmful substances from getting into your bloodstream. And you've got this brain and gut connection, which is something we'll talk in more detail today. And your gut bacteria produces these neurotransmitters and chemicals that influence how we feel, our mood, our cognition, our mental health, and that's what we're going to focus on today. And there's emerging evidence on this bi-directional relationship between your gut and the brain, and it's a new field of potential medicine and medical breakthrough. So it is really an exciting topic that we are going to talk about today. And these integral contributors to our complex ecosystem, it may unlock the secret to mental health itself. And the reason that it's super exciting is because drug development of neuropsychiatric drugs has fallen behind, and many of the existing drugs we have, they have very unpleasant, unwanted side effects. So the breakthrough of psychobiotics as a possible treatment is brilliant. And the gut being at the core of health doesn't surprise a lot of clinicians at all. And we see it day in, day out. The more balanced, the more varied your diet, the better you are feeling more of vitality, you're feeling optimal. For those that don't, it's probably because we need to balance the diet a little bit more. And another good analogy to almost imagine this would be like your petrol. So if you've got some petrol in your car and you've got just enough to just about get you from A to B, so it just about does the job, you also need some that looks after the car, that gives you a bit of a better performance. And that's what I want you to think of for yourself. You are like a tank, and if you get in what you put out. So if we can put in more good things into our diet and into our bodies, we can perform that little bit better as well. And when we talk about the psychobiome, I'm going to give you another analogy again, but if you look at the picture on the screen, you've got a lush, almost green, diverse garden. So the soil, and imagine the soil being the gut, and the plants are representing your microbiota. The gardener that looks after the garden will represent the brain. So the gut, or the soil, it serves as a foundation of health, and the quality of the soil will determine the growth and the conditions of the plants. So that's the same as the gut environment. It helps us with the balance and the composition of the microbiota. So the plants in the garden, which is the microbiota, they represent a diverse array of things in your gut. Just like plants, they have very distinct roles. They interact with each other. They're synergistic in nature as well. And the brain, so the gardener, tends to the garden and it overlooks the ecosystem. And your brain is basically then communicating through the pathways through that gut-brain axis that we just touched upon before. And then we have nutrients. So nutrients are the dietary part of us. And the nutrients are water, sunlight, fertilizer. And they're signified for us as dietary choices that we make. Are we picking enough of a fiber-rich diet to support the diverse terrain in our gut to make it grow? Have we got that diversity? Are we feeding our bodies enough to actually thrive in that environment? And very similar to all gardens, we also have weeds. And weeds are poor diets, the stress-related, alcohol-related, sleep, even smoking, anything that can unbalance the garden. And what do weeds really do is they hinder growth. So they're stealing nutrients and daylight away. And that's very similar for us. Things like stress, a poor diet, bad sleep, is making us very nutritional deficient as well. And having that biodiversity, having that rich terrain of plant species, so our gut bugs, they contribute to the resilience and the beauty of the garden. And that's the same for us. A more diverse diet will also be beneficial for our microbiomes. And then I want you to imagine a healthy mind. So the garden will be almost like blooming, where it does in almost like spring and summer. So a well-cared garden with thriving and flourishing plants, minimal weeds, represents a balanced psychobiome, and that's your gut and brain connection. So we're going to talk a little bit now about the gut-brain axis, because it's something that we've touched on over the last 10 minutes or so. But the gut-brain axis, and this slide will just show you as I'm talking through that you can just see the links throughout, but it's a very intricate network of communication that links your central nervous system all the way down to your gastrointestinal tract. And the signaling system is known as a bidirectional relationship. It relies on the exchange of chemical messengers, and they would be neurotransmitters, hormones, immune molecules, and it's an enteric nervous system. And it's known as the second brain, and it's lined with a huge network of neurons which line the walls of the digestive tract, and it's communicating directly with the central nervous system through the vagus nerve. A vagus nerve is a long nerve that serves almost as a highway of information between the gut and the brain. So your vagus nerve comes almost down here, and if you press slightly just next to your armpit, just before sort of our breast tissue, you feel a bit of tenderness on both sides. That is actually where your vagus nerve is, and there's a lot of things that you can do when you're feeling stressed or panicked or so, almost like massaging that area to help to have a good response in terms of having to reduce the feelings of stress or so. And interestingly, both animal and human studies, they demonstrate that when there are actually alterations in your gut bacteria, we can have alterations in our brain that relates to our mood and our cognition. And a bit of background, the first person to coin the phrase psychobiotics was someone called John Ryan and Ted Tynan. They were at University of Cork, and there's almost now they helped us almost explain how it works as well. So how do those gut bugs located in your stomach, how do they actually affect how we feel, or how are they affecting our brain? And they showed that bacteria can influence the neurons and the brain through several routes. And some of the proposed mechanisms of actions would be, first of all, the microbes or the gut bugs themselves, and they're secreting substances that start to infiltrate our blood vessels, and they're traveling to the brain directly. For example, microbes in your gut produce 90–95% of your body's serotonin, and serotonin is your feel-good hormone, so it's your stabilization of mood, and gives us that feeling of well-being. The microbes and the gut bugs also probe cells in the gut lining, which stimulates that vagus nerve, which is that direct link, and it connects directly with the brain. So the nerve itself, the vagus nerve, runs from the base of your brain to your organs of the abdomen. And the gut bugs can quite literally send information to your brain by stimulating that vagus nerve pathway. But there's also some indirect links that can help with that communication. And if we think of depression as an inflammatory disease, microbes, we know, play a role in influencing immune cells, and they modulate them as such, but inflammation can also affect your brain. And when we have changes in the microbiome, it can trigger those inflammatory responses and the release, almost like a domino effect of inflammatory cytokines. And these are linked to disturbances or changes to your mood and conditions such as depression. And we'll talk about the dietary aspect of it a little bit later, and what foods that we can put into the body that actually have an anti-inflammatory effect to this. And what microbes do is they're activating enteroendocrine cells in the gut lining, and they're sending hormones throughout your body. And some of these cells, they aid in the regulation of insulin, so your blood sugar levels, and serotonin, so your mood hormone. And what research does tell us is there's an increase in depression in people that also take antibiotics. And antibiotics will kill the good and the bad bacteria at the same time. So that's where research is looking to at the moment. And it's also one of the reasons why it's a very exciting time in the gut-brain microbiome science, because if we're looking at statistics, depression and anxiety affects 25% of the population. It's been suggested that about 30% of people don't respond to antidepressants such as SSRIs, and that's why looking into your dietary roles and why more research is being done in this area as well. So how do we actually support a healthy psychobiome? And we need to nourish the gut bacteria by eating high fiber foods. So again, on the slide, you'll just see, as we talk around it, you'll just see it as a circle from the positive side to what can initiate maybe poorer mental health. And there was a landmark study called the SMILES trial, and it shows us that diet could be a really powerful component in managing depressive symptoms. So the study itself, it focuses on the Mediterranean style approach. And I know everyone's heard about the Mediterranean diet itself, but if we break it down into the 12 key food groups, if we can have some foods from every food group, we can be hitting a wide variety of targets that will improve your overall health as well. And the 12 groups, you've got whole grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, low-fat dairy, raw unsalted nuts, fish, lean red meats, chicken, some more poultry, eggs, and olive oil. And if you look at the poor mental health side, where you can see more sugary snacks, highly processed foods, the Mediterranean diet focuses on reducing these very, very low. So things like sweets or fried foods or refined foods, anything that is sugary or anything that is processed. And we touched upon it in the last webinar, but if you look at the back of a packet and you don't recognize half of the words on there or even one of them, there's a big chance that it's processed. So that's a really easy tip that you can look at when you're buying your produce and your food in the supermarket. And in the SMILE study themselves, a question was asked saying, if I improve my diet, will my mental health improve? And the results of the study suggest that the dietary improvement, which was guided by a nutrition expert, it could actually be a really positive strategy for managing anxiety and depression. So the future work in the field of nutritional psychiatry research will focus more on sort of even larger group samples to confirm what has already been found. And if we sort of break it down a little bit into the hows and the whys. So if we look towards almost the positive mental health arch there, and you can see there's a variety of different foods at the top there, vegetables and fiber. And we do want a variety of plant-based foods. Well, I want you to imagine the rainbow approach with this as well, because you want different types of fruits and vegetables in your diet, not just the same ones. That's not to say you can't eat the same vegetable a couple times in a row, but just getting maybe a different 3 or 4 different vegetables every time you shop will give you the variety that you need. And the reason why variety is important is because they're all rich in fiber, which helps promote the diversity of the gut bacteria. And we want to include whole grains like brown rice, oats, quinoa, even whole grain bread. And we want to keep the more whole grain, brown varieties to ensure that we're actually getting all the fibre that we need. And it doesn't also affect our blood sugar levels, because whole grains have a very nice effect on our blood sugar levels that sort of just give it a nice constant flow. The whiter carbohydrates do tend to give us an up and down blood sugar levels, which can then affect things like your energy, and then you'd want to eat more or so, and then it drops your energy again, and you're almost in this vicious cycle. So if you're not keen 100% on whole grains fully, do a mix or switch maybe one of them, maybe either the bread or the pasta or the rice option for a whole grain version as well. And another one that you can see on the screen, again, on the positive mental health side, so the third one down, would be prebiotics. So we want a really sharp focus on something called prebiotics. They're non-digestible fibres, and our gut bugs love them. And that would be garlic, onion, leeks, bananas, apples, artichokes. And prebiotics, they're fermented by specific microbes. When we consume enough of them, they help to stimulate the growth of beneficial bacteria, so our good bacteria. And the aim is to try and get 3 to 5 grams of this fibre a day. And with anything about increasing fibre, you want to start slowly, and you want to slowly increase, because you can get negative effects such as like gas or constipation if all of a sudden you're putting from a non-fibre rich diet to a fibre rich diet. So also water is an important factor here. If you are going to increase the fibre in your diet, have a little bit more water to try and keep that balance. And slowly but surely, little and often, increase the fibre in your diet over a period of a couple of weeks to try and avoid those sort of negative symptoms from it. And a prebiotic fibre such as oats is a really great way to get that 3 to 5 grams in, because it gives us about 4 grams of prebiotic fibre in a portion of oats. If you're adding in something like a banana, you're already there. So you've already got that first thing in the morning if that's when you prefer to eat it. Or another alternative is we could add onion or garlic to soups or curries or stir fries, or an apple as a snack or so with some nut butter or by itself. And they're very easy additions that we can make just in our day, but you've already covered them with almost one meal or one snack or so. And with fibre itself, the recommended amount is 30 grams a day. And the average of people in the UK is about 19 grams of fibre a day. So if we put it into perspective of what 30 grams of fibre might look like, a medium apple contains about 4.5. A cup of broccoli, so one of those measuring cups that you use in baking, so you can see it's quite small, gives you 5 grams. A cup of green peas is about 9. And if you add something like a cup of brown rice, getting you about 3.5, 4 grams. So already with an apple, a bit of broccoli, some peas and some rice, we're probably at about 20, 25 grams. And if we add maybe a bit of black beans to the mix, we'll already hit that 30 gram target as well. So you could almost have maybe an apple as a snack, or the broccoli and the peas as the vegetable part of your meal. The beans could be in some sort of curry or, let's say, Mexican inspired dish or so. So it is very easy to get 30 grams of fibre in, but it's easy to also not get it in the day if we are not having some of these foods day in, day out. But these foods aren't expensive or complicated, so there's so much that you can do with it. And with current evidence at the moment, it's suggesting that if you can get 30 different plant foods in per week, and that will enable us to have a more diverse microbiome than those eating 10 or fewer. So it goes back to our suggestion that you can have the same sort of vegetables over a couple of days, but if you keep changing them, we can hit those 30 different plant foods per week much easier. And if we think about that in terms of day, that's probably 4 or 5 different ones in the day. And remember, a portion is very small. It's sort of the palm of your hand. So you don't have to eat this much of everyone, just a fistful of each if you can. And the reason why we're going over things like this is because sometimes it can stress people out, thinking that they're not hitting their targets or not knowing how potentially easy it is to hit these targets, with also being able to eat the foods that you like and enjoy. So it's more about suggesting almost super boosting meals that add in the potential vegetables or seeds or spices or nuts or legumes to make that meal super and hit our targets. And then we can also eat what we also like to eat as well. And with anyone that does suffer with gut issues, so IBD, which is irritable bowel disease, or IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome, seek advice from your doctor or your clinician before increasing fibre in your diet. And that's a really important note if you can do that. But if we look down again on the positive side, we've got fermented foods as well. And fermented foods is honestly probably not everyone's cup of tea, but it's really worth sticking with or finding at least one of them that you can tolerate or you like that we can put into the diet. So mine personally, and Kirsten knows this, it's sauerkraut. I have a jar of it in the fridge every single day, and I'll have it most days, even just a spoonful or just with my lunch. I like the texture it gives. I like eating by itself. I like eating it with salads or so. But if you, another sort of, well, because Asian cuisine is becoming quite popular at the moment, you've got kimchi. So kimchi is a really, really great one. Kirsty's favorite is actually kombucha, and you have a lot of kombucha based drinks out there now. Just choose the ones without flavors to them, because if you look at the back of the bottles, they contain a lot of sugar. So if you can get the most rawest kombucha, that's a good alternative as well. Another one that we find quite easy to introduce to people would be your live yogurts. So this could be a live strain that you can find in any local supermarket. It has sort of live strain on it, Greek yogurt or live strain yogurt also. And it's a really good, again, cheaper option that you could use for breakfast or a snack, or you can coat things like chicken in it or use it as a sauce or so. It's also very protein rich, and it lends itself really nicely to nuts or seeds or like fruit or oats or so. So you can get around your 5 friendly gut foods almost in breakfast alone. And we know obviously that some people struggle with milk or lactose, but most people, even if you are lactose intolerant or you struggle with a little bit of milk, can tolerate a live strain yogurt. So that's also good news on that front. And fermented foods are probiotics. They're natural sources of probiotics. So before we spoke about prebiotics, and these are probiotics, and they're actually live beneficial bacteria which then contribute to an increased diversity in your gut. So they're helping you digest. The fermentation process is helping you break down complex carbohydrates. You're then making the nutrients in your food more accessible for absorption. And not all fermented foods actually have those live microbes, because some of them are pasteurized, some of them are smoked, and some of them are baked. And an example of this would be your sourdough bread. And although sourdough bread may contain live microbes, there's not enough in quantity for it to be termed a probiotic food. And for something to be termed a probiotic, it has to demonstrate that the live bacteria delivers a health benefit when consumed in large enough quantities. And if it's something that's, if you can put that in the diet, it'll be a really, really good one to implement for positive mental health. It's easy on the gut. It's really beneficial for you to, even it reduces digestive discomfort. It increases your ability to absorb your nutrients from your foods, and it enhances the bioavailability of some nutrients, including B vitamins, which is something we touched on the gut webinar, as being really, really important. And then we want to also think about leaner sources of protein, because high fat, and that comes from fatty cuts of meat as well, is associated with inflammation. And we touched on how inflammation can also have an effect on your mental health. So imagine almost like leaner fish or leaner animal proteins, or if we go towards the vegetarian side, you've got legumes, chickpeas and beans are very, very good sources. And we like to focus on omega-3 fatty acids a lot because there's been so many positive studies and research for long periods of time on omega-3 elevating mild to moderate moods and also improving your cognition. And these are heart healthy fats. They are anti-inflammatory, and the recommended guidelines is 3 portions a week. So 3 portions a week would be anything from oily fish, it could be nuts, it could be seeds, it could be avocado or olive oil. So you can perhaps see why some people don't have enough omega-3 in the diet, because I think all of those foods could be acquired tastes to a lot of people, or allergies associated with it. So if you don't eat any of those foods, we can recommend a good fish oil that has the right balance of what you need for that, because we know a lot of people don't tend to like those foods or are unable to eat them as well. So we can send that out to be distributed as well. And there's a really good brand, it's called Bear Biology. So Kirsty can put the link into the chat box function if any of you were interested in taking that. But with anti-inflammatory fats themselves, they're also very good for snacks, and they're heart healthy, positive on our mental health. So they would be the nuts or the seeds or something that's got oil in it, or avocado, all anti-inflammatory, but also very high in your fiber. So that's also good for your gut itself. And we're going to cover now something for serotonin production in your body, because it's such a key amino acid, and it's called tryptophan. And we need tryptophan in our diet to produce serotonin, which is your feel-good, happy hormone. Serotonin is not found in any foods, but tryptophan is the precursor. So it basically helps make your serotonin. And on the screen, you can see there's a few foods there that are really, really great sources of tryptophan, and they're all very, very healthy. Salmon is one of them, 2 to 3 times a week, as a mood boosting almost protocol. If you do eat salmon, 2 to 3 pieces per week can really, really make a difference. But we've also got turkey for those that prefer sort of a leaner meat protein. It's a great lean source, but as is something like eggs. But if we look more the vegetarian or the vegan side, you've got spinach or seeds. Seeds don't contain as much, but they're really easy to get into every meal because they're so versatile, and you can even use them as a topping. But if we're thinking more of a vegetarian or vegan diet, soy products are a really, really good option for tryptophan. But we have a golden rule with tryptophan, and tryptophan needs carbohydrates to get to the brain to create the serotonin, the feel-good, happy hormone. So it's really effective when, let's say, for example, salmon is paired with brown rice or a quinoa or a grain or a potato or so. It helps in a great amount. And we also have things that are harmful to our microbiome and subsequently our mood as well. And one of them is a lack of fiber. So all of the pictures on the screen there, they all have one thing in common, that is a lack of fiber. They're processed, they have a lot of ingredients in them that you wouldn't find naturally in your kitchen, and they have sugar in them as well. So if you remember our sort of tip about looking at the back of a packet, and if you don't understand the words on the label, it's definitely processed. So again, if we can try and keep as unprocessed as possible, that would be really, really good. And we know that if we're having more, let's say, refined grains or highly processed foods or excessive sugar, it can damage and be very, very harmful to your microbiome. But it's very, very similar to alcohol. And alcohol is something that we want to moderate, because there's some studies that suggest that an odd pint of low alcohol sort of craft beer is actually good for the gut bacteria, which is something that we touched upon last time. And everyone knows or has heard about a glass of red wine, the polyphenols in them are also beneficial. But we want to also have alcohol in moderation, because too much can also lead to harmful things in our body too. And another thing that we can do to improve our mental health and our microbiome would be exercise. And there's so many studies now supporting the use of exercise and your gut diversity. And it's important because scientists consider diversity as a sign for a healthy microbiome, and a less diverse microbiome is linked to poorer health outcomes and an increased disease risk. So the research shows us with exercise that people that exercise consistently have a higher level of gut bacteria, and they have a more diverse amount of species. And if you're helping to keep your gut bacteria more diverse, the gut barrier is tighter, so there's no leaking, and it's linked to a lower risk of diabetes, obesity, and inflammation. And if you remember, we linked depression to possibly being an inflammatory state and metabolic and with metabolic disorders, so with the insulin side, which increases your chance of diabetes. And the relationship is quite complex. So if you, with exercise, do something that makes you feel better, that doesn't almost seem like a chore, because exercise can be almost anything. It could be more going for a run or a workout class or cycling or so, but it could also be a walk away from your desk, and it could be that you're taking a walk at lunchtime or so, or taking a 5 or 10 minute break and then just moving around, because all of that releases endorphins and boosts self-esteem. It promotes the feeling of calm. So we really do know that exercise works and is really, really good for our mental health. It just depends on what suits you with your exercise. So if you think of it just as movement, do what suits you the best. And we'll touch upon now our probiotics, because we get a lot of questions about supplements and probiotics, because it's a very it's a very well-known subject, but it could be very sensitive to most. So we just thought we'd go through a bit of information in case you weren't interested in taking a probiotic. But of course, there's the dietary approach, which is always number one. But what is there to consider is, has the strain actually been accredited by science? So you'll see everywhere, in every health store, in the health items in the supermarket, so many different brands of probiotics. But you want to buy one that has the right strain and has been clinically proven as well. And the strain is worth taking a more prescriptive approach. There's a lot of probiotics out there. So what strain is better for you and your individual symptoms? So whether that is gut problems like loose stools or constipation or bloating, or when everyone's different, but it's worth getting the right strain for you. So it is always good to talk to a clinician or professional beforehand, so they can advise on which one is best for you. And we also have to think about the dose. So on the screen, it is your CFU value. So it's a colony forming unit. And basically that's saying, are they going to remain live and viable after we've ingested them? Is the supplement itself coated? And what's the delivery system in the body? Will it be able to tolerate gastric juices? Will it be able to reach your large intestine to get digested? Will it be able to tolerate the heat and the thermic effects in our body? And research shows that liquid-based products deliver a higher amount of more viable bacteria, but we don't want anyone ever to just buy something or waste your money. So it's always worth asking someone so they can give you the proper guidance. But there are also, importantly, some contraindications. So guidance for people that we recommend not to take probiotics, and that would be the severely immunosuppressed, anyone that suffers from pancreatitis, or someone with an open wound, perhaps after surgery, anyone in intensive care, infants or children with short bowel, and anyone with a central venous catheter. And it's because research is very limited and it doesn't show us or support the reactions, and therefore a probiotic under those conditions should be given only by a doctor or so. I'd also suggest, if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, to seek advice from your GP. And if you are currently on the antibiotics or will be, and you are considering taking a probiotic, you should take them 2 hours apart from each other. But the reason why we're touching on a probiotic is because we also have something called psychobiotics. And what is the difference between the two? And I want you to imagine this as a specialized class, the next generation of probiotic, basically. Probiotic has to show that it delivers a mental health benefit to us as individuals. It's anti-inflammatory, it stimulates the neurotransmitters, so it releases our serotonin, and it could be tailored specifically, addressing neurological conditions. Psychobiotics, they are active compounds, so they result in mental health benefits, and they can include probiotics or the prebiotics, which are those fibers. And evidence does show us that probiotics can directly or indirectly stimulate the release of the neurotransmitters. So they're associated with the production of serotonin, which are our feel-good hormone, and that's why it's an exciting area for us at the moment. And we're going to now talk just briefly about a condition that is prominent for a lot of people at the moment, seasonal affective disorder, or SAD. And the symptoms on NHS guidelines for seasonal affective disorder would be sort of a loss or less pleasure in everyday activities, perhaps feeling irritable, a persistent low mood, feelings of despair, low self-esteem, tearfulness, a reduced sex drive, and becoming less social, and being less active than usual, or sleeping more, or perhaps finding it hard to get up in the morning, and almost suffering from that too lethargic feeling that you actually can't concentrate on anything, and you can't concentrate for long periods of time. And the reason why we thought it was important to talk about seasonal affective disorder today is because this is exactly the right time that it kicks in for most people who suffer from it. And there is a link to reduced serotonin and seasonal affective disorder. And that's because sunshine can trigger may trigger the production of serotonin. And what happens in the winter months is we stay in, there's less sunshine, we get up at 5, 6, 7, it's still dark. We come home at 4:30 now, it is dark. We're basically living in artificial light for a good couple of months now. And when there's less natural sunlight, you'll have less serotonin as well. So if anyone thinks they may be suffering from seasonal affective disorder, we've sort of created a 6-point plan just to try and help you tackle it, which we'll go through now as well. First up, I would always suggest have a doctor's appointment to check your vitamin D levels, because low vitamin D is again very common at this time of year. It's probably the only vitamin every clinician agrees to supplement, and especially between October, November, sort of March months. And it's caused by low dietary intake of vitamin D or not enough exposure to sunshine. And low dietary intake of vitamin D is common for most of us because there's very limited foods that have vitamin D in it. The next stage is to almost get outside early in the morning for almost like a 20-minute walk between the hours of 7 to 10 a.m. Now, I know it's still a bit dark at 7, but there is light coming through those clouds, so there is sunshine coming through, and it really helps to regulate your circadian rhythm. The other point is that cortisol, which is your natural stress hormone, is at its highest in the morning, as a natural response is at its highest in the morning, with the idea that it peaks at midday and then drops before we go to sleep. But stress is in our environment obviously don't work like that. If you can drop that cortisol that's natural and high in the morning down by going for something like a 20-minute walk and exposing yourself to any natural light you can get, you'll notice a really, really big difference. Number 3 would be to get active. So aim for 30 minutes of movement or activity or exercise a day, because it really does show a difference in boosting your mood and your self-esteem. And we touched upon the foods that boost that serotonin as well. So that would be the salmon, it would be the nuts, the seeds, the turkey, the spinach, and always pair them with some carbohydrates so that it can make that serotonin as well. And number 5 would be your pre and probiotic foods, which you spent a bit of time on today. So increasing your fiber with fresh fruit and vegetables. Blueberries are especially good for cognition. So if that's one that you like, adding that into your diet would be brilliant. And finally, and probably the most important, don't suffer in silence. Make sure that you talk to someone to help release that pressure. It could be anyone. It could be a medical professional. It could be a friend, a family member. It could be on an online forum for people that suffer with seasonal affective disorder. There are really great support groups and things out there. And if we had to sort of choose between any of those points, that is probably the most important thing that we can ask you to do, is to definitely talk to someone if you can. Well, thank you so much for listening to our webinar today on the Psychobiome. We hope it was beneficial for you and that you can go away today hopefully being able to implement some of those things to help improve your overall health and well-being. I think we've got a bit of time now for a Q&A. I'll double check on the chat function box, but I'll see if there's been any questions put in there, and then Kirsty or myself can answer them. Let me just make this a bit bigger here. Okay, I'll just read through any of the questions. If anyone has any questions, again, just put them in the chat function box. Okay, so we've got can stress physically affect the microbiome? I don't know if Kirsty can answer some of them in the chat function box, and I'll talk them out and go through some of the questions. So stress can physically affect the microbiome itself. So because it can stop how your body is processing and digesting things and how it optimally is trying to function for basic digestive movements that we need. Stress is one of those that can almost overwhelm and overtake your body, so your body can't then do its basic functions. In turn, us not being able to break down or digest foods properly or absorb nutrients will then affect your microbiome in turn, and you will lose that biodiversity as it's almost just getting rid of all of your good and your bad bacteria, where you'll have to start to build it up again. Stress is a really, really big topic at the moment. So it's really important that we try and find something that helps us individually to manage our stresses. And I want you to imagine your stress like your phone battery, in that when you get up in the morning, it's on 100%, your phone is really working optimally. As it goes through the day and you're using your phone, so we're using ourselves, that battery depletes, it gets less efficient, we can't deal with things as easily. And imagine if something like a FaceTime or a Zoom call came in and your phone was on 20%. It wouldn't last the entire call, or your battery will deplete even more. And that's the same to stress. So when we charge our phones, we're bringing up that resilience. We're giving our bodies the opportunity to be able to deal with a situation a little bit better. So I always say what can you do to recharge yourself to try and keep you on the more optimal level for you and your health? And recharging comes in so many different ways for different people. Is it a good bedtime routine? Is it going home every night and having dinner with your friends or your family or your partner? Is it a cup of tea or a favorite meal or favorite food? Is it watching television, reading a book? For other people, exercise is good. For other people, more deep breathing and meditation work very well. Is it taking a bath? Is it even like a certain smell, like a scented candle or so? There's no right answer for everyone because everyone works differently and what works for you. So almost think, what recharges my battery? What helps me feel that little bit better, if not great? And we want to put that in as a daily thing as well. Then we've got another question on here. Can alcohol affect my mental health and gut? The answer will be yes as well. The best way to imagine what alcohol does is when we drink alcohol, your liver basically breaks down every food that you eat and every drink you ingest, and it says, oh, I need to break this down into these nutrients, and these nutrients need to go to X, Y, Z. When alcohol comes into your body, your liver is so preoccupied with trying to get the alcohol out, and per unit of alcohol it takes 3 to 4 hours to excrete. So you can imagine one drink will take about 12 hours or so, which means it won't put the nutrients of the foods that you eat around the body to the places that it needs. The other thing it does, it's almost like you get 2 fingers in your brain and it swirls your brain like this. So your mood drops slightly, your cognition will drop slightly as well. So it can affect both your mental health and your gut, and vice versa. If one's being affected, so is the other. So we always alcohol in moderation, and definitely have 3 or 4 alcohol-free days per week if you can. That would be brilliant. Perfect. If anyone else doesn't have any more questions, I think Kirsty would have answered all of them. It was, like I said, an absolute pleasure to be able to go over the Psychobiome with you today, and we hope it's been really, really useful for you. And I'll pass over to Marina again, just to close down. But thank you so much for everyone for attending and listening to us.
Thank you very much for that, Francesca. That was such amazing content that you had there. I'm sure we all learned a lot, and I know I did. Thank you also to Kirsty. She did a great job at answering all the questions in the question box, and I can see that was very active. Thank you to everyone else who have joined us today. If anyone is interested in our nutrition service, please contact your account manager or email us on workhealth@expressmedicals.co.uk. Just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our email and on our website. Wishing you all a wonderful day ahead, and thank you again.